I was in the cafeteria, and my dad had sent me the Glimpses magazine, and there was an article about the canoes of Puluwat in there, and it hit me, really hard. I said, I was reading it, and I decided, man, I want to go home. I want to go back to Guam.
You saw that image, and what happened shortly after that? You made a pretty like sudden move to like leave Colorado, and did you just kind of say, this is it, I'm heading back
Yeah,
and now was your first stop Guam, or did you
yeah, it
go
was Guam. I worked at my father's gas station for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Started UOG
Yeah.
shortly after, but I did some research on the canoes and what was left here on Guam. So I found a really good article. That article was about a bicentennial canoe that was carved by Tun Segundo Blas and a gentleman named Emilio Borja. Those were the last two living practicing carvers here on Guam. And Tun Segundo was soon to be my mentor in my apprenticeship starting in 1982, 83. Shortly after that, I met an individual from the Arts Council here, and her name was Sister Callista. And she goes, I know Tun Segundo. Do you want to meet him? I'll take you to his house. So we went up, and I met him, and she goes, you can apply for a grant. It was a small grant. I think it was like $6,000. Long story short, he agreed. I applied for the grant, got it. And for the next few months, I would because he didn't drive, I would go from where I live in Tamuning and pick him up daily. And we would build his canoe. Where we sailed, you and I sailed.
Yeah.
That was the area of the canoe house that was built. A small canoe house, not too large, but that had to be built first. And then we brought the wood down, and then we continued working down there. I always remember that apprenticeship, of course, for the canoe work, but what it drew in, people would come and sit down and just relax. And people would say, this is what it feels like before the war, because we had thatched roofs. And
so this canoe house was done in a traditional way. It was a thatched roof style.
Oh yeah. And at the time, I was the one that gathered all the coconut leaves. The coconuts were really healthy. I got most of our leaves down at Gun Beach. I was young, I could climb. And so I just loaded up on these green leaves and back and forth. Thinking about the time and energy, Matt, I was just like, but we've got it, right? And Tun Segundo was 65 at the time. And I always remember what he said to me. He said, man, Rob, you're lucky you found me. I'm healthy now. We finished that canoe, and then spending time with him, I realized he didn't know the traditional method of the lateen sail and how to change ends and all that. He came from a background of, we used the canoe mostly paddling for fishing.
Sure.
That was the style. And but in the meantime, I had been going to UOG, and I had been studying the canoes of Puluwat. I was trying to find out everything I could. I was working as a gas station attendant up in front at my father's gas station. And at that time, Matt, the very first people from the freely associated states of Micronesia, which they were called at the time, were coming.
Yeah.
So there were individuals, crucial individuals in this story that were working at the gas station. One was Tesney Ham, Joe Kono, and Irmut Ikea. So I worked with these guys. We had finished the canoe with Tun Segundo. It was sitting under there, and I made a traditional. I had a guafak mat sewn and put on the sail, and I would go out to sail out with the Tun Segundo's canoe. But I didn't know how to change ends, Matt. So here's something I want to share with you. I would launch from the shore where we sailed, make it to almost the edge of the reef where it drops down, and then I would literally get out of the canoe and walk it back. I was out there. I took a ride out to the reef line, and then I walked it back. And Tesney came back, and he goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I don't know how to change the end and secure it." And he tied two ropes together. He says, "You have everything here. Here, let me show you." He tied two ropes together. This is how you do it. You walk it back and forth. Man, after that, you couldn't keep me out of the water. I was there every opportunity I could get. So I was working with these guys, and I did the graveyard shift from 10 at night to 6 in the morning with Irmut. And this is how I got down to Puluat in 82. He would tell stories about Puluat, and he goes, yeah, I came here to go to school, but I'm going to go back this summer. Hey, do you want to go with me? And I said, yeah. So we, myself and another individual, Mike Ishizaki, we both went, and that was our first trip. I got asked last night about that trip because most of the young guys, weren't even born or were just little kids. And they go, what was the first time? One individual asked me, his name was Akapito, at the party last night. I said, oh, 82. And then he asked me who I went with and how what was the route we took? Was it direct? And I said, no, we took a ship out to Podlap. And I'll never forget this, Matt. I still have pictures of it. There was myself, Mike, Isao. He was a chief from Puluat, and Irmut was a chief. Because those two were chiefs, 6 sailing canoes came from Puluat to pick us up. And I'll never forget this. We changed into our, because we bought some red cloth on Chuk, and we changed into our traditional dress. And they said, okay, we're getting ready to go. But the feeling, and talking to you really brings us back. As we were getting up and getting ready, we just felt like, hey, we're part of the crew, everybody's getting ready. And it felt so relaxed. And then we were off and running. And I got to say, I was seasick that day. It was real calm, but there was hardly any wind. So it's 20 miles between Puluat and Podlap. It took us, I think we left about 9 or 10 in the morning, and we didn't reach the pass well after dark. And that was the introduction to the reality of atoll life compared to how we live, right? Yeah, so that led to the first trip. And then the second trip, me and Gary, we went, 86. Right. That was for the apprenticeship with Tawa, which is in the book. And then the following year, that's when I made the voyage with the Rapui, Tawa, and all the other sailors up to Guam and back. When I came back, I was working for a short time with the Guam Tribune as a photojournalist. And a good friend of mine, Chris Paris Howard, he said, hey, why don't you write an article on your experience in Puluat? So I wrote full-page article. I think I might have sent it to you, but it just basically chronicled our trip out there. And I read it now, Matt, and I read it from such Western. I see that my Western influence was in there because I was just so surprised. Can you imagine, eating turtle out of a shell? And I would laugh at myself. I said, man, you were out there marinated in one kind of world, and now you're here. I recognized when people first go out there, I said, man, you're going to go through some culture shock. And one of them was, once the ship goes, you're there. So people often, when they go there, though, after they get their fill, the first week or two or whatever it is, they start feeling antsy, like, man, I want to go back home, So they start asking people, hey, when's the ship, coming? They say, oh, well, it's scheduled for next week. And then it doesn't come. And then you start you start going around all through the village and asking people, hey, when do you think the ship is coming? Oh, I'm pretty sure it'll be here in a couple days. You're starting to get like, man, I want to go. So I recognize that I can see it in people. Now I go there and I just when the ship gets here, it gets here. Right. That's when, that's how it is, right? So, but yeah, there's a patience factor that they really have down. And oh, by the way, the first time I was there in 82, I had become aware, and I'd read the book East is a Big Bird before I went. So I told the Irmut, I said, hey, can we go see Kulaman? And he goes, yeah, let's go see him. So we went to the other village in Railong, and he's there all by himself in the big canoe house. And he has I remember this distinctly. He had a mosquito net set up. Yeah. So he was old and spent a lot of time resting, but he wasn't, feeble. He was just old, and it was just like, okay, I'm an old man. Let me rest under the canoe house. And we talk with him, man. You talk about shrewd, man. This guy was shrewd, and that that generation of navigators, Matt, you could feel like a strength from them. Like these are no mess around guys, man. I
Yeah.
mean, these guys who have seen like rough seas and violence and battles and that kind of character. You just could sense it. Rapui was different, man. He was so gentle and so calm, but extremely. He was a prodigy, even amongst the other navigators. They all said, Rapui, he became a navigator at a very, very young age.
Mm.
So something very special about that man. And I was there in '82. We were next to Rapui's canoe house, and I saw all the kids when they were really tiny. And then, of course, when I went back in '86, a lot of people had grown up, and that's when we started our apprenticeship with Tawa. And that was a nice time. That was probably, oh man, everything intact. Everybody's there. Most of the navigators there. Gary went through the same culture shock I went through the first time, because that's his first time on Poloat, right?
Yeah.
So, hats off to him. And then we both had to go through some adjustment with the food. But once we were adjusted, and also we were off and running the first, I think, week. After the first 2 weeks, Tawa, we had met him. He agreed, okay, we're going to work on this canoe. And then we were in the jungle carving, man. So, but there's a natural flow that, it's well established there. They're just doing their thing. His relatives, the village young men would come and help, but there's a flow there that's just very natural. I mean, when people die, we have to stop working. Oh, on Saturdays we fish, because on Sunday is church and nobody works. So we're just getting ready our food to get us through the day on Sunday. And then Monday through Friday, at least for us anyway, was carving.
Yeah.
And for everybody else, it's gathering food, it's fixing, their houses. Oh, we have to stop on this day because the thatch has been prepared for 2 weeks, and now we're going to throw it up onto the canoe house. It had a really nice natural rhythm and flow. They have their land, they have their houses, and there's a very defined way of how social interaction works there. What's taboo, what's not. Being in such close proximity all the time with people, there's always relationship is very strong there. That time spent together. Well, in my particular case, it was just happened to be building the canoe with Tawa. There's a real good cohesion. That's all I can say. Is just it's very cohesive. People are supportive of one another. And here's the thing that I notice. Joyce, my friend that took us around the first time I went, every time he would refer to something like, hey, let's go. We would shower in the taro patch, because they have these little canals cut around the taro mounds. And when the high tide would come in, it would push the water lens up, and it was real clean water. So that's where we would wash. They would put white sand in the bottom of these canals, so it's pretty, it's peaceful. He'd say, hey, before we go, hey, Rob, go get our soap. And I go, okay, this is, and then, hey, we're gonna go over to Ale. We're gonna take our canoe. So it wasn't mine or yours. A lot of things were referred to as ours. The Chamorro word mandanya, together, right? All this togetherness and the gifting. Looking back on this, and I didn't know this was going to happen, is the right people will come at the right time for the right purpose.
I haven't had that kind of experience, the kind of experience of being out in the middle of the ocean, and really like night after night after night getting to a place. Can you speak to that experience a little bit and maybe what that's taught you?
Well, you actually nailed it earlier. I always wondered about, it's a great question, because when I went to Puluwat, I was young, and I'm looking at all these men that just this greatness, right? All this wealth of experience. Well, that's all it is. It's just over time, spending time, and pretty soon they reach a point where they're ready.
Yeah. I think it just goes to show how these stories can be really inspirational and can provide a metaphor for life.
This is what you're covering is, how do we care for each other, you know?
You know, what we do in a classroom or an office, how we treat each other, how we plan for goals, how we get to where we're going together. That all depends on the kinds of values we have together, and that's what I've been really appreciative of learning about, you know, with you and with other Voyagers, and that's really what this book is trying to share with others as well.
You know, the tomorrow phrase, "Munga masangan panuitu nangguaitu." Don't tell me you love me, man. Show me.
Yeah,
What is the fruit of that? So, well,
yeah,
yesterday I was at the corner store, Managuf, and I see this lady come in, and it was a school day, so everybody's getting their kids to school, and she has a little girl, obviously first grade, kindergarten, and I didn't quite know where she was from. I said, "Oh, she could be Chamorro, she could be, you know, who knows." But I was in line with them, and I turned back, and I was just looking at her little girl, and she saw the look in my eyes. She goes, "This man's a dad, you know, he knows," because I said, "You know, you're going to school, right?" I was looking at the girl. I wasn't looking at the mom. I said, "You're going to school?" And she goes, "Yeah, I'm going to school," you know. And so we get through the line, we get outside, and I ran to my car and I got a book, and I said, "Here, this is for you." And her mom opens her mouth, and I immediately recognized the accent. I said, "You're from Chuk," and she goes, "Thank the man." She said, "Thank you." And I just looked at both of them kind of back and forth, and I said, "That book is about you." And I always look at the book, and I tell people when I get the chance, I turn to page 11, and I go, "That's the most important page in this book." It doesn't have any pictures. It has no essays. It just says, "Be kind, help each other." That's it.